Something is starting to become very clear about the current state of the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, and if you're really paying attention to what has happened over the first stretch of free agency, you can already see the identity this team is trying to build before the 2026 NFL Draft even begins. This isn't just about filling holes anymore. This is about shaping a team that believes it can compete right away, and there are some decisions here that tell a much bigger story than people realize. Let's start with the quarterback situation because everything revolves around that. Right now, the Steelers only have Will Howard and Mason Rudolph under contract, and that alone already raises eyebrows. The organization typically carries 4 quarterbacks into training camp, so the fact they've stayed quiet at this position is not accidental. It strongly suggests that internally, there is real confidence about what's coming next. And when you look at the behavior of the front office, not pursuing other available quarterbacks, not making aggressive moves in the market, it points in one direction. They fully expect Aaron Rodgers to be the guy, and it goes deeper than just speculation. Reports indicate that players inside the locker room want Rodgers back, and leadership voices have made that clear. That matters. When a team aligns like that behind a veteran quarterback, it's usually because they've been given signals behind the scenes. At the same time, the idea of Will Howard being the starter feels more like a contingency plan than a real expectation. Betting on a 6th-round rookie who hasn't taken an NFL snap would be a massive gamble, and nothing about the Steelers' approach this offseason suggests they're willing to gamble like that. Now shift to the running back room, and this is where things get interesting in terms of balance. Jaylen Warren looks like the most explosive option on the roster, the guy who can create big plays and change momentum instantly. But the addition of Rico Dowdle gives this team something they've clearly been missing, a physical presence for early downs and short yardage situations. This feels like a deliberate attempt to recreate a complementary backfield where each player has a defined role. Expect a near 50-50 split here, not because they're equal players, but because together they form a complete system. At wide receiver, though, there's a clear message: this group is not finished. DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. give the Steelers a strong foundation, no doubt about it. But beyond that, there are real questions. Roman Wilson is currently sitting as the projected WR3, and that's a huge moment for him. Last season, he didn't deliver what the team expected, and now the pressure is real. The front office is almost certainly going to bring in more competition, whether through the draft or additional veteran moves. With 12 draft picks available, it would be surprising if multiple receivers aren't added to inject youth and depth into this unit. The tight end room has a solid 1-2 punch with Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, and you can already imagine how this offense might lean into 2 tight end sets, especially on early downs. But depth is still a concern here, and that's something the Steelers will likely address before the season starts. It's not about replacing talent, it's about reinforcing it. Then comes the offensive line, and this might be one of the most quietly important areas on the entire roster. There's stability on the right side, but the left side remains uncertain. Dylan Cook is currently in position to take over at left tackle, especially with Broderick Jones dealing with injury concerns. At guard, there's still a clear need for improvement. The pieces are there for a solid unit, but without added depth and at least one more reliable starter, this could become a weak point. And when you look at all of this together, you start to see the bigger picture. The Steelers are building a roster that has flashes of high-end talent, but also clear areas where they're not done yet. This isn't a finished product, it's a team in transition, but one that believes it can accelerate that process quickly with the right final moves. So now the question becomes unavoidable, and it's the one that defines everything moving forward. If Aaron Rodgers does return and these remaining gaps are addressed, how dangerous can the Steelers' offense actually become in 2026? What do you think? Because if you take everything we just talked about and push it one step further, the real story here isn't just about individual positions, it's about how all of this is being designed to work together, especially when you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, where things start to look even more complete. Up front, the Steelers are clearly staying committed to their identity, but with a twist. The base 3-4 is still there, something that has defined this franchise for years, but there's a growing expectation that we're going to see a lot more variation this season. You're still looking at TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith coming off the edges, which immediately gives this defense one of the most dangerous pass rushing duos in football. Add Cam Hayward into that mix, still playing at a high level, and the presence of Derek Harmon alongside him, and suddenly you're talking about a front that can control both the run and the pass depending on the situation. But what really stands out is how they plan to rotate pieces. Sebastian Joseph Day is expected to take on a major role in early downs, especially as a run stuffer, while Keanu Benton can slide in during passing situations to bring more interior pressure. That kind of rotation matters over the course of a long season. It keeps players fresh, and more importantly, it allows the defense to adapt depending on the opponent. And there's also a strong indication that four-man fronts are going to be used much more often this year, which changes how offenses have to prepare for Pittsburgh week to week. At linebacker, this might be one of the biggest what-if areas on the entire roster. Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson have the athleticism, there's no doubt about that, but last season didn't show their full potential. Now, with a new defensive approach under Patrick Graham, there's real belief that this could change. Graham has a track record of getting more out of his linebackers, and if that trend continues, this unit could take a major leap. You also have Malik Harrison providing that physical presence in certain situations, and Cole Holcomb bringing versatility as a rotational piece. It may not be the flashiest group in the league, but there's a path here for it to become a very effective one. Then you get to the secondary, and this is where things start to feel different compared to what we've seen in recent years. Joey Porter Jr. and Jamel Dean on the outside give the Steelers two aggressive corners who can hold up in man coverage, which is critical if you want to be flexible defensively, but the real X factor here is Jalen Ramsey and how he's going to be used. This isn't just a traditional cornerback role. There's a strong expectation that Ramsey will move all over the field, playing safety in base formations, and then sliding into that big nickel role in other situations. And that role is not just about coverage, it's about physicality. Ramsey has built a reputation as one of the best run-defending defensive backs in the league, and that's exactly what the Steelers want to tap into. When you combine that with Minkah Fitzpatrick's reliability and Deshaun Elliott's tackling ability, plus the addition of Jaquan Brisker as another physical presence, you start to see a secondary that isn't just built to cover, it's built to hit. And that's the theme of this defense overall: speed, versatility, and physicality. The kind of unit that can pressure the quarterback without always blitzing and still hold up on the back end against top receivers. If everything clicks, this has the potential to be one of the most complete defenses in the league, not just in flashes, but consistently. Special teams, as expected, remains one of the most stable parts of the roster. Chris Boswell continues to be as reliable as it gets, and there's already talk about a contract extension that would reflect his value to the team. When you have that kind of consistency in the kicking game, it quietly wins you games over the course of a season. So when you step back and look at the full picture, offense, defense, and special teams, what you're really seeing is a team that's not far away, but also not quite finished. There are still moves to be made. Free agency isn't over. The draft is right around the corner, and with 12 picks, including 5 in the top 100, the Steelers have the ammunition to reshape multiple areas of this roster very quickly, and that's what makes this moment so important. Because the foundation is there, the identity is forming, but the final pieces will determine whether this team is just competitive or truly dangerous. And the more you sit with this, the more you realize that what happens next could define not just this season, but the direction of the franchise for the next several years. Because having 12 draft picks, including 5 in the top 100, is not just an opportunity, it's a responsibility. This is where great teams separate themselves from average ones, by turning potential into real, immediate impact. Think about it. We've already talked about the wide receiver room needing more depth, the offensive line still having some unanswered questions, and even certain defensive rotations that could use more long-term pieces. The draft is where all of that can be addressed in one weekend. And if the Steelers hit on even half of those selections, this roster could look completely different by the time training camp begins. But here's where things get even more interesting. It's not just about filling needs, it's about how aggressive this front office is willing to be. Do they sit back and use all 12 picks? Or do they package some of those assets to move up and target a specific player they believe can change everything? That's the kind of decision that can define a draft class. And based on how this roster is currently constructed, you can absolutely make the case for both approaches. If they stay put, they can inject youth across multiple positions, build depth, and create competition everywhere. That's how you sustain success long term. But if they decide to be aggressive, if there's a player they truly believe is a difference maker, especially at a premium position like wide receiver or offensive line, then moving up becomes a real possibility. And given the urgency you feel around this roster, especially if a veteran quarterback is indeed coming back, that aggressive approach might make more sense than than ever, because let's be honest about the timeline here. If Aaron Rodgers is part of this team in 2026, you're not thinking about a slow rebuild. You're thinking about winning right now. You're thinking about maximizing that window, even if it's short. And that changes how you approach everything, from draft strategy to roster construction to how you evaluate risk. Now, bring it back to the locker room. You have veteran leaders who want to win, young players who are trying to prove themselves, and a coaching staff that's being asked to bring it all together under a new vision. That's not always easy. Talent alone doesn't guarantee success. It's about chemistry, execution, and putting players in the right positions to succeed. That's where this next phase becomes so critical, because if the Steelers can align all of that, if the offense finds rhythm, if the defense plays to its potential, and if those draft picks contribute early, then suddenly this team isn't just competitive, it's a problem for everyone else in the league. The kind of team no one wants to face late in the season. But if they miss on those opportunities, if the gaps we talked about aren't properly addressed, then you're looking at a team that might be good, but not good enough. And in a league as competitive as the NFL, that difference is everything. So now as we move closer to the draft, every decision becomes magnified. Every move, every pick, every signing, it all adds up. This is where the real shaping of the 2026 Pittsburgh Steelers happens. And when you start looking ahead to draft night itself, that's where the tension really builds, because everything we've talked about up to this point suddenly turns into real decisions with real consequences. This is no longer about projections or possibilities. This is where the Steelers show exactly how they view this roster and where they believe the biggest difference can be made. At pick 21, assuming they stay in that spot, the board is going to tell them a lot. And this is where the internal philosophy of the organization becomes critical. Do they stick to best player available, something that has worked for them in the past, or do they lean into positional need given how close this roster feels to being complete? Because there are arguments on both sides. If a top-tier wide receiver falls into their range, someone who can immediately step in and push Roman Wilson down the depth chart while adding explosiveness to the offense, that's incredibly tempting, especially when you consider how important it is to surround a potential veteran quarterback with as many weapons as possible. On the other hand, if there's a high-level offensive lineman sitting there, particularly at guard or tackle, that might be the smarter long-term move, protecting the quarterback and solidifying the foundation of the offense. And don't rule out the possibility of the defense being addressed early either. Even with all the talent already in place, adding another disruptive piece to that front seven or reinforcing the secondary could take this unit from very good to elite. That's how dominant defenses are built, by constantly adding waves of talent rather than waiting for a weakness to appear. But here's the part that Steelers fans really need to pay attention to. It's not just about the first round. With 5 picks in the top 100, this team has multiple chances to find immediate contributors. That second and third round range is where you often find starters, players who may not have the same hype as first rounders, but end up playing major roles right away. If the Steelers scout this correctly, they could walk away from day 2 with 2 or 3 players who are on the field from week 1, and then you